Fellow cardboarders, welcome back. It's been a while since I filmed. I had a stressful exam period and now it's over and I passed. I'm finally done studying and ready to become a teacher. And at the same time I'm able to finally film, edit and upload some more videos. Before we get into this is the result of the current commander vote, which I'm gonna end here at 30 votes, which is great. So kudos to you all who voted. It was quite a tough race, a tight race, but in the end Spellslingers with Toshiro actually won by a sliver. And I'm gonna build that deck next and show it off to the channel, while I am keeping in mind that a whole bunch of you wanted to also see me build the Mill and Reanimate deck, which I'm considering, but I would have to accumulate quite a lot more cards to actually make it work. So we'll see about that, but I also have a whole bunch of other ideas which I'm gonna put onto the channel for you to vote on. So keep an eye out for the next commander vote. I will let you know in one of my next videos when that's gonna start, but also you can just look onto the community tab and see if it's up yet. But for today I have a very special video planned, which is me showing off my Vial Smasher and Krark commander deck. I already made a short a couple of months ago, but there were several people who actually wanted me to show off the deck in depth and also share the deck list, so here it is, and it's time to think outside the deck box. This is actually one of my most favorite decks which I built in quite a while, and I hope by the end of the video you also see why that is. Now before we go into what's in it, let's look at the two commanders first. This is Vial Smasher the Fierce. I think this is actually a she, so whenever I cast my first spell each turn, she deals X damage equal to the amount of the mana cost which I spent on the spell to a random opponent. And she has partner, that's why she is teamed up with Krark, the Thumbless, who allows me to, whenever I cast an instant or sorcery, flip a coin, and if I lose, I put it back into my hand and it doesn't resolve. And if I actually win, I get a copy of this spell and also cast that. So, as the flavor's text says, it's double or nothing. And what I really like about this deck is that it is like a high risk, high reward kind of deck. So what this deck does is deal a whole bunch of damage all the time with Vial Smasher, while also trying to cast and copy spells. And if I do, I get a whole bunch of payoff. If I don't, I take it back to my hand. And I did a little spin on it. I don't know if I find the tweet of someone who inspired me to build this. They didn't share a deck list, but they said those two and traps, and this is what the deck is built all around. And yeah, let's look into the deck. I have here some card draw, some ramp, and as you can notice, normally when I do a deck tech I also have a removal pile. You could say that's this one, but it's also the trap pile. So the removal and the traps are in here, and some are also in there. So this is how I kind of tried to split the deck into the different categories. And I love the fact that these two are able to be built around traps, which you normally don't see. So there's a trap card and several others, and cards that are like traps. But now, I think I stalled enough. Let's look into the cards of the deck and see what my thought process was on including all of these cards. I'll just start on the top here with the card draw cards. Normally I try to add around 10, I think it's like 7 or 8 card draw cards here. The reason is that if it resolves, Krark doubles the card draw and I don't need as much card draw. But then again, there are several card draw cards which are just repeatable card draws. So I'm playing Read the Bones, scry 2, draw 2, lose 2 life. Copied is just great for 3 mana. I have the Dispute, which allows me to sacrifice an artifact or creature as an additional cost. I have to do that, and if it doesn't resolve, I sacrificed it and get nothing. So this is the high risk, high reward kind of part here with this spell. But if it does resolve, I get 4 cards and create 2 treasures. The idea for this spell is not to sacrifice any of my creatures, since this deck is a spell-heavy deck rather than a creature-heavy deck. So if I have something to sacrifice, it will be probably treasures or the like, but there are moments when I actually have to sacrifice my goblins just to draw some cards. Sometimes that happens. Knight's Whisper, similar to the Read the Bones, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. No scry here. We got a creature here, the Twilight Prophet, which is like a repeatable card draw, kind of. So she is a flyer vampire. She has Ascend, which means if I have 10 or more permanents, I have the City Splicing for the rest of the game, which is normally what happens throughout the game. And at the beginning of your upkeep, my upkeep, I reveal the top card and put it into my hand, and everyone loses X life and I gain X life equal to the amount of mana costs. Keep this in mind, because Vial Smasher is looking at the mana costs here to deal damage, and there are a whole bunch of cards which cost a huge amount of mana, but the idea with the traps is that they always, or most of the time, have alternative costs. So they are expensive spells, but then if I want to cast them, I can cast them for less mana. So this is a way to gain some life back and also draw some extra cards. Mind's Eye, just a great inclusion for any deck without blue, allowing me to draw a card whenever an opponent draws a card by paying 1. And this also costs 5 mana, so once dealing 5 damage during my turn, very nice. We've got the Anvil of Bogarden, which is a beautiful group hack card. I really enjoy playing that. If you haven't used it yet, I think you can buy it for around 20 bucks. A reserved list card from Visions, and allows everyone to have no maximum hand size, and at the beginning of the draw step they draw another card and have to discard a card then. So this allows me to filter through my deck, don't have to care about my hand size, but also making everyone feel warm and cozy until I start slinging spells and dealing damage. The Protection Racket is, I think, a card that is kind of under the radar. I'll show on screen how many people are actually playing it on EDHREC. What's the percentile? This card at the beginning of your upkeep allows you to reveal a card from the top of your library for each opponent, and they choose if they want to pay the mana costs in form of their life and then exiling the card, or if I get to put it into my hand. And if I reveal, let's say, for example, this Lava Ball Trap, they have to pay 8 life or I get it to my hand. So this normally doesn't draw you lands, but if you play politically and you really look nice into your opponent's faces and are like, I really don't have lands, one of them might actually don't pay the 0, and they have a little favor later on to ask you during the game, and you get your land. But most of the time this just draws you the expensive cards of your deck, and I think it's a really nice card generally. I wouldn't play it in any combo style kind of decks, because at that point someone will pay the life to remove your combo pieces if they get revealed. But if you're playing a casual game and have a couple of cards which cost more mana and even have alternative costs like cards like Force of Will, all these kind of stuffs, then Protection Racket is a great card. This was my card draw pile. Let's look into the ramp category, which I also like to play around 10 of. We have the classic Wayfarer's Bauble, which allows me to sacrifice it for 2 and put a basic land into play. We have the Soul Ring here, a Mind Stone, which allows you to sacrifice it later on and draw a card. Got a Fire Diamond. I do not play the Black Diamond, since the deck is a little more red than black, if I recall that correctly. Playing Rakdos Charm, Felwar Stone, and the Talisman. And then some more expensive ramp. As you've seen, it's sorted by mana costs, this pile. And we have the Black Market, which, if there is a board wipe and this stays on the board, gives you like 10-15 mana during your first main phase. And this allows you to play very expensive spells and sling a whole bunch of damage. So this card has to be removed, otherwise you're able to play a whole bunch of cards. Revel in Rich is similar. I haven't won with treasures yet, but the ability to give me, I don't know, like 2 or 3 treasures every turn or so, using them to cast my stuff if I really need to, and also with the Deadly Dispute being able to sacrifice a treasure with this, it's just a great way to get it out. And then I'm playing Mana Geyser, which gives me normally like 20 manas or so. Everyone is normally tapping themselves out. And I have a whole bunch of red mana. Great card. And lastly a Dreamstone Hedron, which is a bigger Mind Stone and allows you to draw 3 cards later on. And keep in mind, all these more expensive ramp spells also, like these 5, also deal 5, these 4 I mean, deal 5 to 6 damage with Vial Smasher when I play them during my turn. So the idea will be to cast sorceries, artifacts, enchantments and the like during my turn, which are expensive, and later on during my opponent's turns I also want to throw some vials in their faces randomly, and I will play my instants. Speaking of instants, let's look at the core of the deck. If I say this deck is a trap, it's a trap! It actually is. So I'm playing a whole bunch of traps, and traps have the ability of this. They cost a whole bunch of mana normally, but they have an alternative cost if something special happens. And I do love when it happens. So the Lava Ball trap is actually one of the more brutal cards. As I already said, as you will see, I'm not playing a whole bunch of creatures, so if my goblins die, they die, I just play them again. And the Lava Ball trap says this: if an opponent had 2 or more lands enter their battlefield this turn, I can play it for 5 instead of 8, but I still deal 8 damage with Vial Smasher to a random opponent. And then I destroy up to 2 lands and deal 4 damage to all the creatures. So this is an instant board wipe. So if something's getting out of hand and someone is also ramping, I can use this to destroy lands and deal 4 damage to all creatures. But if I have Krark on the battlefield, keep in mind, all my instants and sorceries are able to be copied. So I flip a coin, either I put it back into my hand, still deal the 8 damage with Vial Smasher. If I win, I cast it. If I don't, I put it back into my hand. So that's, in my eyes, still a great payoff, paying 5 life for a random 8 damage to any opponent's face. If it goes through, it goes through. If it doesn't, I just take it to my hand and have a later turn where I can cast it. And keep in mind, if I copy it, I am able to destroy 4 lands and deal 8 damage to all the creatures. Next up, Nemesis Trap. This one is a fun combat trick which deals 6 damage with Vial Smasher on the battlefield. And if a white creature is attacking me, which I just love, that there's also a color restriction which makes it more interesting and fun, I'm able to pay 2 black. Fun fact, the attacking creature doesn't have to attack me, so if I see the white player attacking someone else and I want to make some friends, I pay the 2 black mana. Since a white creature is attacking, I deal 6 damage to a random player, and then I exile an attacking creature. It doesn't have to be the white creature, I can exile just any attacking creature, and then actually copy the creature, put it onto the battlefield, and exile it at the end of the turn. That makes it able to actually block with the exiled copied creature. So if I am getting attacked, I may take their strongest attacking creature, exile it, it's gone forever, I copy it, I block with it, destroy probably another creature that is attacking me, and then exile the token. All that for just 2 black mana. Some cuter trap is the Inferno Trap, either 4 mana, 4 damage, or 1 mana and 4 damage, and I'm able to deal 4 damage to any creature with Krark on the battlefield. I'm able to deal 8 damage. And by the way, Nemesis Trap, if I copy it, obviously I exile 2 attacking creatures, which is just so great, a 2-for-1. Ricochet Trap, great card against blue players. If someone plays a blue spell, I may pay 1 red instead of the 4 mana and change the target of a spell with a single target. Doesn't have to be my targets, can also target an opponent. This one, if I copy it, it's probably just silly, but maybe if the stack is bigger, I can change more targets. Ravenous Trap. This one exiles all cards from target player's graveyard. And this one actually just costs 0 if an opponent had 3 or more cards put into their graveyard. With all the graveyard decks, all the mill decks that are out there, after a board wipe, you name it, I may pay actually 0 mana for this, deal 4 damage, and with Krark, exile 2 graveyards. If this doesn't go through, I still deal 4 damage, put it back into my hand and cast it again for 0 mana. So this one will go through. Another trap. This one looks at an opponent who draw 3 or more cards this turn, and then I may play it for 1 red. And the trap deals an amount of damage equal to the cards in target opponent's hand. So it doesn't even have to be the opponent who drew the cards, I can just Rune Flare trap another opponent, which I just love. Deals 6 damage to a random opponent, and also if I have Krark out, it deals twice the damage they have cards in their hand. This card is focused against life gain decks. If there's any life gain creature out there, or just any card that gives them 1 life point, instead of 7 I pay 1 black and drain a player for 5 life points. With Krark copied, I drain for 10. These were all the cards that are actual trap cards, but now these cards are cards that have alternative costs. For example, Lethal Scheme, great card generally in Commander if you have a couple of creatures. Those 2 goblins are normally out on the battlefield. I may use Convoke to cast the spell and destroy a creature or planeswalker, great. And they both connive if I want to convoke the card, which means I loot a card to draw it, discard it, and if it's a non-land card they even get bigger. Not that important, but the filter ability is just a great gimmick for a card that just probably costs me 2 mana to cast. A lesser known card, if you haven't played in the Weatherlight cycle in, what was it, 1997. This costs 6 mana, but it has an alternative cost of removing the top 3 black cards in my graveyard. I don't have that much graveyard recursion. I had Underworld Breach in this deck, so if you want some more brutal interactions, even put that in as well. And keep in mind which ones you want to remove, but the top 3 have to be removed. You're not able to reorganize your graveyard, by the way. In casual games you normally do that, but if you have this in your deck, you shouldn't rearrange your graveyard. Now, if I remove 3 black cards from my graveyard, I may still deal 6 damage with Vial Smasher, probably hopefully copy it with Krark, and deal 3 damage to any non-black creature, and gain 3 life. So 6 damage to a non-black creature and gain 6 life. Snuff out, I may pay 4 life, instead of paying the 4 mana cost, so deal 4 damage, and destroy a non-black creature. If it's copied, I destroy 2. This one allows me to sacrifice 2 mountains instead of paying the mana costs, which will be seldom that I do that, but if I'm about to die or about to be able to kill someone, I will use it. And I already have, and I think I already won with this one. So the ability to just not pay anything, sacrifice 2 mountains to deal 6 damage with Vial Smasher, and up to 8 damage to any target is a great ability and a great card. Similarly, Pyrokinesis allows me to remove a red card from my hand. I will have several cards that I might not want to use, maybe a trap I don't need, you name it. And again, deal 4 damage, and I actually may divide it wherever I want. Keep in mind, 6 damage with Vial Smasher, up to 8 damage divided with Krark. Murderous Cut. This card should deal 5 damage, and I have the ability to delve, exiling cards from my graveyard to remove the colorless mana costs and destroy any creature. With Krark, I destroy 2 for 1 black. This one we had a poll in the community tab about. The Delight Fireblast is a very undervalued, unknown, and underplayed card. This is an instant board wipe and will probably destroy most of the board, and also deal 5 damage to each opponent. So let's look at the card. If you cast it just out of the hand, I wouldn't recommend that. You deal 2 damage to each opponent's creature and the opponent's, but you may foretell it for 2 colorless mana, and for 6 you may use this instant to actually deal 5 damage to each opponent and each creature. Then you copy it with Krark. Vial Smasher only deals 3 damage. But you may copy it and deal 10 damage to each opponent and each creature of your opponents. So your goblins actually stick around. This card is bonkers in this deck. And obviously I'm playing the Thumb to make sure that I get my spells through, not 50% of the time, but 75% of the time. And yes, it does happen that even if you have 75% hit rate, 25% of the time you fail. But it's just so funny to see everyone rooting for you, even if they're your opponents, and they kind of like also go through the same emotions, being like, oh man, that sucked. It's, I don't know, the third spell you didn't get through and whatever. And they will leave you alone for a round or two, you know? And if you really hit hard and copy and copy and copy, you get so much value that obviously, yeah, everyone wants to hit you at some point. You're dealing damage to everyone randomly, but that's the fun of the game, you know? Try to be political, being like, oh man, I can't control Vial Smasher, you know? Okay, now, next one. The Wild Magic Surge, just a great removal card. I put it into the trap category since it's an instant. Destroys any permanent. Copied with Krark is just so great, being able to destroy any 2 permanents and then having them reveal the cards until they reveal a card with the same card type, which they are able to then put onto the battlefield, is really, really nice removal. We're also playing the best red counterspell. Not gonna read through all of it. If you wanna read through the card, it's a little long. You can pause the video here, but it's a great way to neutralize your opponent's spell. We have Fork if anyone is playing a nice spell we also want, we play that and copy it. But also if we're playing a big spell which we actually want to copy, we actually cast it after the big spell. So we have the Blood for the Blood God in here, which costs colorless less per creature that died this turn. So the cheapest it can cost is 3 mana. And Vial Smasher will deal 11 damage to any random opponent. Most of the time, if creatures died this turn, and if they were a lot, the goblins also died. But we have ways to sneak this in, for example with the Electro Dominance here. And you've seen there are spells that allow me to get like 10, 20 mana with the Black Market as well, and the Mana Geyser. So if people let you have those, you are able to actually cast Electro Dominance, deal X damage to any target, and then, for example, cast Blood of the Blood God as well. And Krark will copy both of those spells, hopefully. And keep in mind that the X is also an amount that Vial Smasher is taking into account. So if you pay actual X 11 and then 2 red, you are dealing 13 damage to a random opponent. So these X spells are also a great way to just deal a whole bunch of damage to a random player. Blood of the Blood God, I forgot to tell you what it is about. You discard your whole hand and then draw 8 cards, and it deals 8 damage to each opponent. If you copy it, you draw twice 8 cards, you're able to cast your instants in between, then draw a new hand, and deal 16 damage to all of your opponents. Black Sun Zenith, just a great board wipe. Your goblins will probably also go away, but being able to deal a whole bunch of damage, dealing with indestructible creatures, great way. And keep in mind, Vial Smasher also deals X damage as well. Shadow Skull Smashing, I think most of the time I play it as a land, but I am able to cast it for X as well and deal X damage to up to 2 targets. And if it's bigger than 6, I actually may deal twice X. And copied, let's say I paid 6 mana and the 2 red would mean 4 times 12 damage to, well, 4 targets. The backside, by the way, is just a red land which comes into play tapped if you don't pay 3 life points. This card I just love. For 5 mana, that's an enchantment that allows you to have your opponents lose 5 life points if they cast a spell, whenever they cast a spell, if they do not discard a card. So this one is continuous damage to your opponents just by having it around. Or, well, they have less cards in hand. This is just a normal and nice removal. For 5, you deal 5 damage, probably copy it. If you copy it, you even net more mana than you put in. So that would be 6 mana and you just paid 5. Shriekmaw, alternative cost is the Evoke, but then it dies. but you deal 5 damage if you play it as your first spell. Blasphemous Act had to be in here, obviously. Great Board Wipe deals 9 damage to a random target and then 13 to every creature, and costs less for each creature in play. The Gear Hulk I normally draw cards with, because your opponents know that you have a whole bunch of expensive spells. If you reveal them and have them deal the damage, that will be probably a lot. Then I'm playing this interesting Storm card called Ignite Memories for 5. And it has Storm, so for every spell that was played before, I copy this and may, well, choose a different player or not. And they reveal a random card from their hand, and the Ignite Memories deals damage equal to the amount of mana for the spell. And I actually copied it a whole bunch of times already and dealt a whole bunch of damage to different players. And it was just random and fun, like, you know, you get some information about their hand, and also you have the emotion of, oh, do I get the expensive spell in my face or not? You get the idea. Maddening Hex! Just a great card. It got really expensive. Look at the price of that card. Looking forward to having it reprinted. I curse a spell, and whenever they cast a non-creature spell, they get dealt up to 6 damage. They roll a d6, and then it gets attached to a random opponent. So in a multiplayer game, someone has that curse on them, they cast a spell, and then one of the other 2 opponents get this attached to them. Last card in the trap category is, I think, Choice of Damnations or something in English, for 6 mana, and this is a really interesting card. Do consider it in 1 or 2 of your black decks next time you build one. You choose an opponent. With Krark you choose two opponents, and they choose a number. Either I choose to have them lose that many life points, or they sacrifice but that many cards. So if they choose 10, I would either choose to have them lose 10 life, or sacrifice everything except for 10 cards. That also includes lands, and this card is so brutal, and I already had people lose the game because of this card, and copied. It's just, oh, it's so beautiful. Now, on to the last pile before we look at the lands. Hope you enjoyed this video so far. Do consider subscribing, since we are only 10 subscribers away from 200 subscribers. Our next big goal. Shred Memory. I am not playing this for the effect, but for the transmute. As a sorcery, I may activate the transmute costs and discard it for 3 mana and get a card that costs 2. Now you may wonder what this might be. It's the Thumb. This card I only have in here for the Thumb. If I have the Thumb, I'll probably, I don't know, discard it, or if I'm really bored and have nothing to do, I will cast it, but probably not. So this one is a tutor for the Thumb for 3 mana. I know a card like Demonic Tutor is better, but I don't always want to play the same cards over and over again in all my decks, so I chose Shred Memory. Krark's Thumb I already talked about. This one is one of the key cards obviously in the deck, because it makes my Krark 25% more efficient. So instead of just flipping 1 coin, I may flip 2 and ignore 1, and the chances are now higher that I actually cast my spells. This one also synergizes with my coin flips, because whenever I win a flip, I create 2 treasures. Extra mana is great. I will probably not use the lower ability. Diabolic Tutor, obviously again, Demonic Tutor is better, but I wanted a more budget variant here and not the strongest deck that I can build. But if you want to have it stronger, then go ahead, put in your biggest and juiciest tutors. Diabolic Tutor and all the tutors in the deck, there will be a couple more, are hopefully copied with Krark. So that's why I also didn't want to use the strongest tutors that exist to balance out the power of the deck as well. So this, you could also argue, goes into the range of card draw. Now I draw 2 cards out of my deck for 1 card, and I may actually choose which ones. Koskun Falls, which is a propaganda for black, but I have to tap a creature at the beginning of my turn or have to sacrifice this. Very useful in a deck that does not play a whole bunch of creatures. We are playing the fun combo of Stranglehold and Time Sieve, just because it deals up to 9 damage if I play them, but the Stranglehold is also just very useful in preventing deck searches from my opponents and skipping extra turns. And with the Time Sieve, you may look through the card, it's a whole bunch to explain, but to explain it in an easy way, this one at the beginning of the next upkeep lets everyone reveal the top card of the library, and the player with the highest amount of mana costs gets the next turn. Now, we are playing a whole bunch of expensive spells, so the chance that we're actually getting the next turn and the turn after and the turn after is quite high. But you won't believe how often it was that I actually didn't get the next turn. So this one just makes a whole bunch of chaos. But if I have Stranglehold out, your opponents are not allowed to get any of the extra spells. So if they would, they actually don't, and the next player just continues the turn. And if I would get an extra turn, only I get it through the time sieve. We're playing classic Damnation board wipe here. Playing classic Chaos Warp removal here, just great if you copy it with Krark. Remove 2 cards randomly. Randomly meaning turning them into a random card. This one might save a goblin or is put into play as a swamp on the backside. But if my goblins are taxed too high, I might want to use it to save one of them at least once. We got the Valakut Awakening. If my hand is just really weird, not useful, I can just switch them out, put some cards of my hand on the bottom of my library and draw that many +1 cards, or I play it as a red. The Charmbreaker Devils I'm thinking about removing and replacing with another card, since they're so expensive for the little they do. And the fact that they give me a random instant or sorcery out of my graveyard is okay. But most of the time I play them and till my next upkeep they are already dead or something. Like something happened to them and I'm like, nah. Yeah. But my Vial Smasher also deals 6 damage, so that's nice. And the devils get bigger when I cast instants and sorceries, so that's also nice. And well, another creature. They are scarce, as you've seen in my deck. Increasing Ambition is a really nice card in this deck. So this one is a tutor as well for 5 mana. You may tutor 1 card from your deck. With Krark, hopefully 2. And then this is interesting. With Flashback, if you flash it back for 8, you still deal 5 damage, not the flashback costs. But if you flash it back and it resolves, you get 2 cards out of your deck. So with Krark, you actually get 4 cards out of your deck. But if this does not resolve with Krark, you get to actually, from Flashback, put the card Increasing Ambition back into your hand. If you lose the flip, this card goes back into your hand from Flashback. So that's really nice. And now that I'm talking about it, I think I should put in more Flashback cards. I don't know. Maybe 1 or 2 better Flashback cards as well, so that I can also retrieve them if I lose the flip. The Dark Perdition, I think it's called in English. For 5 mana I tutor again. And the 3 mana that it produces if I have 2 or more instants or sorceries in my graveyard, I normally hit. And if I copy it, I even net more mana than I put in, deal 5 damage, get 2 cards out of my deck, and get 6 black mana into my mana pool. Gamble just for the lulz. Normally I copy this with Krark, tutor 2 cards, discard twice randomly from my hand 1 card. So often I hit the cards that I actually tutored, but well, what can you do? It's just fun to play and fits into the theme of random stuff that this deck does. The Descent into Avernus is a card that I find very nice and useful. It increases some tempo on the board. So at the beginning of my upkeep, I put 2 Descent counters on this enchantment. Then each player creates as many tokens as there are counters on that. So 2, then 4, then 6, then 8, and so on. And this also deals damage to all the players equal to the amount of counters on there. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on damage every turn, every rotation. So we all get more and more treasures and more mana therefore, but we also get dealt damage equally. So in my deck deals a whole bunch of damage already, that I take some of the damage is okay. I get some treasures, everyone gets some treasures, everyone can play some stuff. I do like the group huggy effect that this card has on the board. We are playing the budget Urborg here, Blanket of Night, which has the same effect as Urborg but costs 3 mana. And I like that I can probably deal some 3 damage here, have the enchantment lying around. And we are playing Cabal Coffers. So I'm trying this one out here. I have Urborg in a whole bunch of other decks and I wanted to give this one a shot. And lastly, we have the Possibility Storm here for more chaos and some interesting interaction with Krark. So, first of all, 5 mana means 5 damage with Vial Smasher. And then, this counts for every player. Whenever someone casts a spell from their hand, they exile it, and they reveal cards from the top of their library until they reveal a card with the same type, and then they cast that, actually. The rest of the cards get put onto the bottom in a random order. So, and what this means with Krark is this. We cast a spell, let's say Choice of Damnations, and we have 2 possible outcomes here. With Krark on the board, Possibility Storm and the choice, and let's also say Vial Smasher, we deal 6 damage to some random player. We have this on the stack, targeting some player, and then also this goes on the stack and this goes on the stack, because they both trigger when you cast something. Now let's resolve it like this. Krark goes on top of the stack and resolve this first. So normally this would be put in exile and under the library at some point, but with Krark we also get a copy probably. So this one would get under the library with Possibility Storm, but with Krark on the battlefield we copy it and get a second Choice of Damnations. The copy we keep on the stack put up here, and then the Possibility Storm resolves and you put the Choice of Damnations on the bottom of the library and reveal cards until you reveal a sorcery. But there's a second thing that can actually happen, is this. You lose the flip. Now what happens? You do not get to copy this, but you actually get to put Choice of Damnations into your hand. And now the Possibility Storm, well, it can't exile, but it still knows that it was a sorcery, so you reveal cards until you reveal a sorcery card and cast this for free. Now again, Krark obviously triggers for the next sorcery reveal, and then you also have the option of putting it into your hand or copying it. But I do like the option of having this chaos and also being able to control, well, not really control, but kind of like have different options than your opponents. Like either you copy it, get the copy, and are able to cast actually the card you want to cast and get a new card out of your deck, which you are probably also going to copy or put into your hand, or you put the card into your hand, don't lose it, but you still get something out of that. And I do like this interaction a lot. And I haven't played this card in such a long time, but I finally put it in here and tested it out, and it was a whole bunch of fun. Now guys, you stuck around till the end. The last pile, thank you so much for watching. You are the special few who may look at the wonderful shiny lands here. We're playing the Infinity Blood Crypt here. We're playing another fetchable land here from BFZ. And I think, yeah, 3 fetches which can fetch those 2 or basic lands. We're playing the Vista, which can also fetch a basic land. A Strip Mine just to be able to handle any way too strong lands like Cradles or opponent's Cabal Coffers, since we can't have that. We're playing 2 of the Cycling lands to switch them out for hopefully a better card than lands at some point. Bojuka Bog, just a general normal inclusion in any black deck to be able to handle graveyards better. Blightstep Path and the Searstep Pathway for a black or red mana source. We are playing Command Tower, the Suit here, a Ridge, a Scryland, which is very useful, this wonderful dual land, and the, I think, Sulphur Springs or something it is in English. That's it for the non-basic lands, and then we have, I think, 7 swamps and 8 mountains. Also chose the Infinity basics here, just because I like the foiling, though it is quite subtle, I must say. Yeah, I don't think you can tell it on the camera. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you everyone for being so patient with me on me making this video. I hope you like the deck. The deck list is in the description. If you have any suggestions for some cards I haven't thought of, do put them in the comments below. Hope to reach you soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a beautiful day. Bye bye. Snuff out. I may pour. Snuff out. I may pour. We cast it after the big. Activate the transmute cow. We actually cast it after the big spell. So we have the block for the blood god in here.